It's Jim's Little Boat. I'm Jim. Back in June, my buddy Tony and I did a little overnighter on the north end of Hartstein Island, and it rained for about 20 consecutive hours, and it rained hard. And yet the weekend wasn't that miserable because we had a little 8x8 blue plastic tarp, and we made a little cockpit tent out of that, a boom tent, and God, we stayed pretty dry. So I thought it might be fun to have a bigger boom tent since it's probably going to rain in Washington again. Plus the boom tent's good for keeping sun off the cockpit in August. So I decided to go ahead, even though my skills weren't really up to it, and make a 8-foot by 10-foot boom tent out of Sunbrella material. And as usual, I don't know what I'm doing. I just kind of stumbled through it. But if you'd like to watch, I'll show you how I did it and how it turned out. I'm pretty much the last guy in the world that should be making a video on how to make a boom tent for your Catalina 22. The tarp worked really well, but I wanted something bigger and a little bit tapered. So it'll be 88 wide at the masthead, and it'll be 84 wide back at the end of the boom. And the whole thing will be 120 inches long. It'll have about 10 grommets. And these are some really long seams, so I don't know if I'm up to it. I couldn't decide if I wanted a 2-inch hem and center the 1/2-inch grommet there, or a 1.5-inch hem and center the grommet. So I made a little test, and I looked at it, and I think I'll go with the 2-inch hem and white thread, which is kind of bold and stupid because it's so big. It's going to really show up if I make a mistake. Just to get started, I loaded up 5 bobbins with white thread. I've got one in the machine already. So to get started here, I'm going to need 2 pieces that are 124 inches long. You can see I've wavered a bit back and forth, but 2 pieces 124 inches long, and we'll sew those together with a semi-felled seam. Wow, that is a lot of cloth. I'll go ahead and cut it. If you're going to do much of this work at all, a hot knife is a pretty good investment, and I won't bother to show you the video. Sailrite has great videos. Well, as it turns out, I've already screwed up. I made it 120 inches instead of 124. I thought I'd remember to put the 4 on. I didn't. Oh, well, there's plenty of extra on the boom dimension. So we're about halfway through the first seam of 120 inches of Sunbrella fabric. It's going pretty well if you have a table saw to drape it over on both sides. I did have a little owie. Now this is the hidden seam, so it doesn't matter very much, but I kind of got the hang of it as we went along. I think maybe I'll change to blue thread for the final stuff. This is a long ways to go with white thread on blue fabric. My ability to keep the stitch straight throughout the 10 feet got better as it went on, but it's just not good enough for what I want to do. I know it's a tarp, but gosh, we got to make it look decent. So I will change the blue thread to hide these mistakes. So one thing that I've learned here is that one 10-foot seam pretty much uses up a bobbin, and I've decided to change the blue thread. So I'm going to go ahead and load up 5 more bobbins right now, and we'll change over to blue thread, and then I'll show you the setup on how I use my table saw to work as a sewing table. I tried several different methods for handling this 80 square foot piece of cloth that was 10 feet long. This is what I ended up with. I have my workbench there and my table saw there, and I bridged the gap with a long piece of plywood. I put the smoother plywood on top because the friction from the utility grade just was too much to overcome. And I stood in that hole right there and kind of pulled the cloth through and pushed it up against a fence. And after I got the hang of it, it kind of worked pretty well. Obviously, I need more practice, but this setup did seem to work pretty well. So here's kind of where we're at. I've done a seam, and if I was going to do a semi-felled seam, I would have had to sew one more stitch line right across here. And I chose not to do that. The reasons are simple. My skills are not there, and the throat on the machine isn't that big. So as you can see, the throat on this little LSZ one is only about 6.5 inches long. It's not very tall. In order to make a semi-felled seam, I would have had to roll up 4 feet of cloth that was 10 feet long and feed it through that little space. So This machine is not up to it, and more than that, my skill level was not up to that task. I just couldn't get it done. But I think this will work, and I ironed it, and now you can see I screwed up. I ironed it down flat, and see these little marks? That was a mistake. Well, so what I should have done instead is I should have laid a piece of sacrificial cloth up against the seam, and then when the iron went down the seam, it wouldn't be dragging over there on this side, and it would flatten it out. Oh well, live and learn. With more than 80 square feet of cloth, I'm not going to start over, but it would be nice if I didn't have those marks there. I'm getting ready to make the end hem, so I've just kind of folded this piece over 4 inches, made a little line, put some staples periodically. I have yet to iron it, and I did come up with a plan for how I'm going to handle this. That would be 1, 2, this would be 8 layers of cloth if you were to sew over that seam. I'm sure the machine would do it, but you have to have a way to keep it from bumping and falling off the edge. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to sew right up to it and stop, and then sew it here, and there'll be a grommet right there anyway, so none of that will matter. I hope. And this time I'm going to try and be a little smarter. I'm not going to iron on the cloth. I'm going to iron on a little piece of wood. After 46 feet of seams, I am getting straighter, and my technique has improved, but I'm still not even a little bit tempted to change over to white thread, even though it would look so cool. Check it out, 10 feet of staples. This hem is all ready to go, except it really isn't, because I forgot to taper it. I realized that at 3 o'clock this morning. Had a hard time going back to sleep. So I got to take these staples out and remeasure, probably use a chalk line, and then readjust the hem before I sew it. Now the truth is, I could probably get by without the taper, and I wouldn't have to do this, but I want the thing to fit as well as I can. This project is so long I had to put the taper in with a chalk line in 2 tries, but it tapers from 0 and goes into 2, which will give us 4 inches for the whole thing. And I kind of drove a nail, let me zip over here, and to hold it into the plywood while I did the chalk line, but it'll work fine. I'm going to start installing the grommets. I've got a little punch here, and I ordered the special grommets from Sailrite. I would refer you to their video because I'm sure it's superior to anything I could do. Made a pretty neat little hole, and I would recommend that you use the heaviest hammer you can find. I pulled this out of my mechanics box. And here we have the special anvil I got from Sailrite, and the punch, of course, and the hammer. And then these grommets, what makes them special is they have these little teeth that dig into the canvas, and they won't spin. Okay. Not quite enough. That's pretty good. Just do it 11 more times, or 14, or something. I think one of the things that helps you when you want to do dead blow work like this with a heavy hammer is you need a dense, thick surface. This workbench is 3 layers of 3/4 inch MDF. It is super, super dense. I think the in-shop part of this job is done. All the grommets are installed. I figured out how I'm going to tie the stern end of the tent to the back of the boom, and it's marked. There's a little piece of Dyneema line. I need to gather up a bunch of bungees. I probably want them all the same color, and go down to the boat and see how I'm going to make this thing fit. So that will be where we do our next piece of video. Well, there's a little bit of luck. I had an old Tanzer sail bag that will exactly fit the rolled up boom tent. Well, gosh, there we go. I think I'm pretty happy with that. Let's look at it from the back and the inside. We're in the cockpit looking forward. I think it'll keep the entire cabin dry. It goes up past the hatch, so that's great. I'm standing down in the cabin, and it looks pretty good. Now, if only I could cover up that part at the very back. Oh, well. Well, gosh, I think I'm pretty satisfied with this effort. Now that I know, I may sell this one and make a new one that's a little wider at the back and Who knows? Maybe we'll even use white thread. Hey, this is Jim's Little Boat. I want to thank you for watching, and we'll see you out on the water.